Hey, it's Jackie. My podcast, The Natural Healing Reel, features guests from all over the world. They're sharing their stories of natural healing modalities. My intention on the show is to aid people with alternative ways in healing, physically, mentally, and emotionally. This podcast recognizes the essential role that mainstream medicine plays in our daily lives, and in no way should this be taken as medical advice. Please seek the advice of a competent medical professional for your care as you see fit, and most importantly, take care. I have a guest today who I am excited to talk with. He is going to share with us the whole micro and macro dosing of psychedelics and the incredible healing power that this has for us for, PTSD and all these traumas. Apparently it helps us heal. And so not sure why we haven't known about it for all those years, but we're going to talk to somebody who does have all the background on it. Welcome, Randall Hansen. How are you?
Great, Jackie. How are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for coming and hanging out with me today. Really excited.
I'm
really
sorry,
excited about your information and your book, Triumph Over Trauma. This is what is my new it's my new logo.
Well, I as soon as we connected and I saw that you were talking about, healing for inner peace and joy, it just touched my heart because that's my mission right now. I'm just on a mission to help people heal, and that's what I'm all about. And I'm excited to be here to share that with you today.
Yeah, what a great way, right? Because this shift and this paradigm that we're in, where you're sharing people's wealth of information, knowledge, right? And their wisdom of what they're doing for healing, instead of stepping on everybody to try and get on top of them, to be better than them or whatever. This has been such an incredible journey for me. And I kind of landed in doing this podcast, Dark Night of the Soul. So it was just one of those intervention things. And so I'm kind of winging it and learning as I go. But you know what? It's so amazing talking to people all over the world that have, I don't have anybody who I've talked to yet that has the knowledge of all of this area. So where do we start with this? How did your journey with this begin?
Well, it's funny. I just had a meeting yesterday with my local psychedelic society, and I was talking to this new member, and it sort of fits this podcast really well because he lucked out. He suffered childhood trauma, he suffered religious trauma, and he suffered abuse in his first marriage. So he had a lot of things going on, and he found a therapist and did talk therapy for a number of years. And at some point about 2 years ago, his therapist, and I so love this, his therapist said, I think we've gotten as far as we can talking, and I think you might want to think about doing psychedelics to further open up some of these memories and connections and further process these trauma reactions. And so we all kind of went, what, a therapist? And of course the therapist couldn't legally do it because they're afraid until we make these medicines legal, they can't do it for fear of losing their license. But totally supporting him and going off on his journey. And then he's still working with the same therapist now, helping him integrate all these experiences from these psychedelic journeys he's had. And so I think, and he had to get over the 50 years of propaganda and lies that we've been given about psychedelics. And so he's a classic example of what we're talking about today, as someone who has, suffered trauma. And my belief, along with Dr. Levine and Dr. Mattei, is that we have all suffered trauma, whether it's and we shouldn't even compare trauma, because trauma is trauma no matter what. But some of us know the trauma because it was so big that we remember it. But I also talk about little traumas that are like little paper cuts that add up to something that explodes within you at some point because you haven't processed all those little traumas. So we all have trauma, and we all need to find a healing modality that works for us. But we've been given all these lies, first about psychedelics from, if we look back at the history in the 1960s, LSD, which is kind of funny because that's probably the most maligned psychedelic, but LSD was used by psychotherapists in talk therapy sessions and healing sessions. But of course, the counterculture took it over, and the powers that be got afraid that we were all going to be full of love and peace and not war, because the Vietnam War was going on then. And so we classified all psychedelics as illegal, and not only illegal, but most of them are at the highest level of illegality. And the US did that, and the world kind of said, okay, we'll go along with the US, except for different pockets around the world where some of these medications are still legal. But so, like this gentleman yesterday, this new member, he was like, yeah, I grew up on DARE. All we heard about was don't do drugs, don't do drugs. And that's why we in the psychedelic community are calling them medicines and trying to push that to separate, the hard drugs, the cocaine, heroin, those type of things, that psychedelics actually help cure those addictions. But that's another story. We'll get back to that. But so that, I think that's where we are today. We have this, what we're calling emerging healing modality, which is only emerging because we've had it locked up for 50 years. But and then if we look back at the indigenous peoples, they've been using these medicines for thousands of years. It's so cool when you see these archaeological studies and they're like, oh yeah, we found traces of psilocybin in these pottery. And it's like, okay, they were also using this for healing ceremonies and religious ceremonies. And so that's where we are today, I think, is that we are on the cusp of this revolution in healing. It's not the only modality. There are lots of other wonderful modalities, meditation, breath work, but I think they all come together in this beautiful thing. And the other thing I wanted to mention is he also tried, of course, antidepressants, this gentleman, this new member yesterday, and he found them completely useless. In fact, he said, this is really interesting. He said something like, the antidepressants made him feel like nothing, and that was worse than his depression. And so he got off of them. And that's a pretty common reaction. Either people feel not themselves, or they feel like there's a gauze around them and they can't see clearly or think clearly. And we were lied to about those too, because the research that was done on most of these common antidepressants today, they were only studied for short-term use, for a depressive weak moment, period. So maybe for 7 days you take them and then you stop once the depressive moment has lifted. And yet people are on them for a lifetime now. There's no short-term. You take one every day, or you take a multiple of them every day, and it's just sad. It just saddens me, and that's how I got into this. It's like, I just want to help heal the world and find the truth. Just understand the truth and find your own healing modality, but understand that you've been lied to about a number of things in this area.
Yeah, it's really incredible, isn't it? I had a whole education when I went to work in the film industry with my now ex-husband. All the Teamsters who had a transportation, right? And so I was working in the transport office, right, in the production office there, and it was, they all come in to sign in or whatever they need. Well, I had them bringing me newspapers and like all kinds of education on exactly what you're saying. Like, this is, it's the prohibition, and it was overtaking the cotton, and like people, we have no idea. And here it is, all of a sudden it's legal, and all of a sudden everybody that's got cancer or anything is on it. Like this after, and then you still have people that are walking around saying, oh, shame on you because you're smoking pot or something. Yeah. Now, as a teenager, I hated it. I was like, it wasn't good for me. I was like, right? And then I'd fall asleep on a whole bunch of food and wake up. And yeah. It really wasn't my thing, but
So,
I have friends that and family that for a lifetime that was it was really great for them. And
yeah.
and when I
Good.
went through kind of that whole trauma or whatever of my last 5 years, it probably with that education and them kind of helping me with my arthritis, I made up this oil with the coconut oil, and literally I couldn't even open doors, and then all of a sudden, within 5 minutes, the swelling's in half. There's no pain. It's bizarre, and I don't have any pain in my fingers anymore. I haven't for years. But how does it go from that incredible to,
Beautiful.
from something that's supposed to be so horrible for us, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
and we're not even talking psychedelics yet.
I know. Well, I
Psychedelics,
mean, this is fantastic because cannabis is a master plant. There's no question about it. Yes, it's kind of gotten a bad rap because of the recreational use, and I think we all have stories in our youth of trying it, smoking it, and being same thing, either eating too much, the munchies, and all that fun stuff. But and my father, who was an organic chemist, and I wish he were alive today because I would love to talk to him about some of the novel compounds, psychedelics that he might be totally against or might be for. I don't know, but I called him the marijuana cop of the neighborhood because he would come in the house late at night and be like, I smell marijuana in the neighborhood. Interestingly, I found out years later it was my brother who was smoking and blowing the smoke out his bedroom window and floating down outside.
Well, and it's such a strong smell, right?
Yes.
Like, as you've been around it, everybody's like, "What's that smell?"
Yeah, yeah, but I agree. I do. I have a CBD roll-on that I use, a topical. I have a CBD tincture that I use for pain that blows me away in how beautiful it helps me sleep with no pain at night. And so, and we see it with not only, it started off with cancer patients taking it to help with the nausea, but we're seeing people taking it and seeing things happening in terms of the cancer even reducing and things like that. So there's a lot of medicinal anecdotal stories about the medicinal value of cannabis. The problem is because it's been so recreational, there's not a lot of hard research on it. So that's the next phase that I'm looking forward to, is getting some of this hard research to be able to put it in the face of some of these legislators and others and saying, look, this is the evidence. This is a healing plant that should not be Schedule 1 and illegal, and not, and unless you're in certain states where it's now legal medicinally or recreationally, or in certain countries that have that.
Well, it's just bizarre how how it's just so highly illegal, and then all of a sudden overnight it's yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
let's talk about the psychedelics. I was learning in my little journey here in the COVID, I was learning the crypto blockchain, that whole area. And in that, these gentlemen that I was following, they were talking that psychedelics are going to be like the best next thing, that it'd be like buying Bitcoin when it first started type thing, because of the healing power. And the world doesn't know about it because the media doesn't talk about it, right? So mainstream is still, unless you're looking for this information or you're interested to find another point of view, right?
Yeah.
But
yeah, I mean, we're slowly it's working its way into the mainstream, on the fringes of mainstream, I would say. Like John Oliver had a segment on psychedelics about a month ago on his is it still HBO? I think it's still HBO show. But that's a paid subscription and blah blah blah, so it's not quite as available. But yeah, one of the big issues we face in psychedelics is the business side, because there's so much potential, but there's also a lot of fear that some of these big companies are going to come in. There's a lot of fear of the pharmaceutical industry in general and the psychedelic and holistic side, because we know the revolving door between psychedelics and business. I mean, pharmaceuticals and regulation and regulation and business, but the big question is access and cost. And so, if these big for-profits jump into the psychedelic space, I mean, we already see that with ketamine. Ketamine is the one quasi-legal psychedelic, although it's not truly a psychedelic, but it has psychedelic properties, psychoactive properties. But the cost of a ketamine treatments range from, like $500 to $1,500 a treatment, and almost no insurance company, health insurance that I know, I think there's a few small insurance companies that do cover it. But, how can you afford that? And so that's the other big question. I mean, yes, with psilocybin, with mushrooms, if you're lucky enough, you can go out to the cow pasture down the road and find them and dry them out, and you have your own source, or buy them from the farmer or whatever. But with most of these other ones, that is a big issue right now in terms of psychedelics. Is what is that future modality going to look like? Are you going to go to a therapist to get your psychedelics? Are you going to go to a store like the cannabis store you can go to now in many places? Or what is it going to look like? And we just don't know.
So you know what, that's interesting, because I think it's not really opened up yet. I know where I live.
Yes.
I've been asking about it because I've been hearing, and I want to just ask you about all that. But there is a place in downtown Vancouver,
Yep.
apparently. And the other thing I heard was there is places you can go, kind of like a spa type place where you do that with somebody, which I think is amazing, especially if you've got fear around something, to have trained, qualified people saying, this is, because it's the knowledge, right? We don't have the knowledge. So as soon as we get the knowledge and we have the wisdom of that, then it gives us back our power. Right out of fear, right?
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. I mean, you can do a psychedelic journey on your own, and many people have. But I think especially if you have any fears, concerns, or you have a lot of trauma and that's going to come out, then there's a combination of tools. You can there are trained facilitators that will come to your house, or you meet up at an Airbnb, and you have that safe experience because you're in a safe spot. You're with a guide that's experienced and can help you. In fact, this gentleman yesterday, this new member, he talked about how his guide in his journey, he was stuck in a room and he was getting a little frightened. And his guide just he turned to his guide, and his guide just said, "You don't have to stay in this room. Just go. There's a door. Go there, move to the next room." And he did. And it was just such a simple thing, but a beautiful thing. If the guide weren't there, he might have been stuck in this kind of bad room where it would have been a negative experience, but it wouldn't have been a healing experience either. And then the other option is there are people that are doing group ceremonies. First of all, establishing a location where they have what we typically call a sacred space or a healing space, and then they have ceremonies there, either for individuals or small groups, and that's actually the small group healing is actually the indigenous way, because that's how they all did it. It was community; they all came together for healing, and so that's the other big issue we have in psychedelics right now, is trying to figure out we have the indigenous model, but the Western model doesn't quite align with that, because we don't really have that community. We don't, in those cultures, we have multiple generations living together. They tend to be smaller groups, and they all share and help each other out. And, some of us are lucky enough that we might have something somewhat similar in our lives, but I would guess most of us don't know half the neighbors in our apartment building or in our little cul-de-sac or whatever, because we've just become so isolated. So I love that some of these healing that we're trying to do does bring back the community aspect too. But for something like psilocybin, I think one-on-one makes the best, because psilocybin is a very inward-driven journey, and so that's a great tool to focus on your own healing.
Interesting. So talk to us about micro and macro
Yeah.
dosing.
Well, it's funny. Yeah. When I first started writing this book,
Which is
Triumph Over
Trauma. I love that name.
Thank you. Thank you. It's funny. That wasn't the original name, and I can't remember what the original working name was. And right when I was working with a designer on this cover for the book, I looked at the title. I'm like, oh, I don't like that title. And so I got a little focus group together with a couple of close friends and colleagues, and I said, here's the core of the book. Here's a couple of the words that I'm playing with, and then through that process, I sort of crowdsourced and got that title, and I love it. And everyone talks about the cover, and I love that aspect as well. And just a little aside, you didn't ask this, but it's just a funny story. I didn't plan to write a book. I'm a big advocate, educator for healing, and psychedelics is one of the, like I said, emerging ways to do that. But I thought I would just do it by writing articles, videos, that kind of thing. And I was on the end of an LSD journey, and I was sitting on my deck on a late summer afternoon, beautiful sun, golden hour. And I just got this, and I can't describe it. And that's one of the fun things about psychedelics is you have these experiences, and it's so hard to put them in words. But it wasn't a voice. It wasn't like, Rand, you have to write this book. But it was something. It was a force that said, you have to write this. And so I ran inside, grabbed a pad of paper, and came back outside, and I wrote this outline that was given to me. And 90% of the current book is that outline. The only thing that psychedelics or the whatever didn't give me was the microdosing. And so the original book was just going to be all about macrodosing. And then the more I started talking with people, the more I realized that microdosing has become a extremely big trend in healing. And I think the reason for that is twofold. One, microdosing, and I'll explain microdosing in a second, but on one hand, microdosing, I think, is a way to get to know the medicines before you try a bigger dose. So it's, you take so a microdose is typically 1/10 of a full dose of medicine. And so we talk about it being so low, such a low dose that you'll have no effects. You'll feel almost no effects from the psychedelic. In fact, a lot of people after they microdose say, well, I didn't get any benefits from it, because that's how subtle these things are in some cases. So there's no for microdosing, and we'll talk more about the mechanics in a second. And then the other reason that people microdose is because they're not ready to do a big full-on journey. They've heard about psychedelic journeys, or maybe they're still have that fear from the fried egg on the, just say no campaigns, the propaganda campaigns. So with microdosing, you take this again 1/10 dosage, typically once a day, and there are different protocols. So one protocol, you do it 2 days on, 1 day off, and then back to 2 days on, 1 day off, and you repeat that for a month. There's another one that you do 3 days on, 2 days off, and then there's one that's called the work week, which is 5 days on, 2 days off. But the point is you take a break during the process to let your body let the medicine work its way through, and then once it's through, you start the dose again. And then after 30 days, you typically take at least a 1 to 2 week break before starting the microdosing again, if you need to start it again. And the microdosing has many of the same benefits as macrodosing. You're still going to me, besides the healing, which is amazing, But the cool geeky part about psychedelics that I absolutely love is that we now have the technology to understand that psychedelics help our brain make new connections, help our brain grow. This idea, it's called neuroplasticity, and I just love that. And it also explains how it helps get rid of OCD and depression, and we can talk about that too. But anyway, so even microdosing, you still get that boost in neuroplasticity, which I think is such a great benefit. But here, and I have several stories in the book. I have 23 stories in the book. 20 are macrodosing and 3 are microdosing. And I included stories because I think no one can argue with people's experiences. And yes, these are anecdotal, but the research supports these anecdotal experiences. But the 2 stories that I think, microdosing stories that impacted me the most, was one, was this woman who was a psychedelic skeptic, said, I don't believe it. I don't think it's going to work, but I'll try it. I'm a scientist, so I will try microdosing on myself. And she had this really deep anxiety about her dog. She had these moments where she thought surely her dog was going to die. Something was going to happen. And even if the dog was sitting right next to her, it was just so strong. And so she did microdosing for a month, and was journaling all this time and saying, I don't see any effects. I don't think this is working, blah, blah, blah. About a week after she stopped microdosing, she was walking her dog and she had this anxiety attack about her dog dying. And when she got past that, she paused and she realized in the past 30 days when she was microdosing, she had not one of those episodes. So the microdosing did actually help her with her anxiety. But that's what I'm saying. You don't necessarily see the results until you look back at it. Another one, and this story is not in the book, and I so wish it was, but the man's a farmer, and he was dealing with his crops, and he just didn't quite have the time to share his story. But his wife had a stroke and was paralyzed on the entire side of her body. And they did traditional occupational and physical therapy and all those things, and really saw no improvement. And so he had heard about psychedelics from something, typically how we all hear about it somehow from something. And so he tried microdosing with his wife. And the first 2 months, nothing really happened. In the 3rd month, she started to be able to wiggle her fingers. And again, that might be all that happens. It might be nothing more than that. But it's such a powerful story because, again, that's that neuroplasticity, because a stroke damages the brain and the psychedelics are working in there to make these new connections. Now, she might never fully recover. I'm not saying psychedelics are miracles, and we try to really push that point. These are not miracle pills. You don't take them once and you're done, you're healed. But even for this gentleman, again, yesterday, so he's now been doing psychedelics for 2 years. He only does them about every 6 months because he finds that toward the end of 6 months, his depression starts getting stronger. You can feel it coming back. So he feels like he takes a maintenance dosage, and that keeps him going healed for another 6 months. And so that's where we are with the research too. We know that as we look at the research, psychedelics, first of all, do a much better job than antidepressants, and do a much better job. The antidepressants barely do a better job than the placebo effect. And that was sort of hidden in the research as well. Psychedelics are so much better than that, but we're seeing that maybe there's still, so in some cases, OCD, depression, cured from one psychedelic, one macro big dose psychedelic experience. But in many cases, there's need to be a maintenance, but it's not an everyday thing, and it's not an addiction. It's not anything like that. In fact, psychedelics are anti-addictive. They have anti-addictive properties, which is why we're finding great use of psychedelics for treating alcohol abuse, opioid addiction, and other types of addiction, sex addiction.
How does that work? What is happening that is assisting in people having that addiction relieved for them? How does that
That is, I'm still learning about that process. We do know that even the Alcoholic Anonymous founder used LSD to help him cure his alcohol addiction, and then also helped give him the download for the 12 steps and all that whole program, which is amazing. Ibogaine, which is a plant medicine that's from Africa, seems to be the strongest one, the best medicine, best psychedelic for curing, especially opioid addiction, but also alcohol. And I'm not sure what it is, but it's really there's so many stories of especially veterans, because they are very dear to my heart, and that's how I actually ended up getting into the psychedelic space, was because of hearing Jesse Gould, who is the founder of Heroic Heart Project, that helps cure veterans of PTS and TBI and war trauma. And so many veterans that, were self-medicating with alcohol, and maybe were even self-medicating with alcohol before going to war for other traumas they had, come back from that experience and like, I don't even want to have a recreational glass of wine or beer. And it's like, wow, how does that happen? I think part of it is that it clears the trauma. So there's less of that need we have, when we're triggered, we want to find a solution to that trigger. So when we're triggered with, we hear a gunshot, and I have PTS from war, and a gunshot gets me in that fight or flight mode. I need something right away to reduce that, to calm that mode. And so typically it's alcohol. In other cases, it's hard drugs. And I think what the psychedelics does is it allows you you get put into what we call the observer mode. And so for the veterans especially, they get put back in that battlefield, but they see it in a non-traumatizing way. They see it as a way to understand the whole picture of it. And I think that's partly why these psychedelics work on stripping away these addictions, because there's less of a need for that addiction anymore, because you've cleared that trauma.
So that's really interesting, actually, because one of the books, his name just left me, of course, is being the watcher, right? That, sitting in the seat of your soul.
Yep.
And a lot of it is watching which is our consciousness, the person watching and listening to the 50 to 80,000 thoughts a day that were the same thoughts as yesterday, that we're unconscious of, right? Yeah. They say 95% we're unconscious of.
Yep.
So you know what? We got to stop guilty to blaming ourselves just on that note alone, right? Should have known better, should have done better, blah, 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 right? Yep. I'm losing my train of thought because I always go down another pathway. But I just lost my path. It'll come back to me. So okay. carry on, and I'll jump back and go. Oh.
Okay, good. Well, good. I want to talk about that, because these negative thoughts that we have, these negative loops. I was talking with someone with OCD who was cured of it, by the way, through psychedelics. Amazing. And she was talking. I know OCD and depression too, in that matter, are these these negative loops we get on. And she said her best description of her experience was it was like being a hamster on one of those wheels, and she couldn't get off, and she was just going this damn wheel, and she was just, get me off this thing, and she couldn't. And the psychedelics just went, threw it away. And what we're seeing is, and again, the geeky moment here, but not only are psychedelics creating these new connections, but somehow the psychedelics are finding the faulty connections and taking them down. So that OCD loop is a faulty connection. It's a faulty loop that your brain is like, oh, I like this because now it's smooth, so I'm just going to stay here because it's nice and smooth and go in that circle. And the psychedelics say, nope, let's strip that away and make this new connection. And it's I can't, talking to these people and seeing how they've been transformed from these medicines is just amazing. So yeah, we tend to be in these negative, or comparison. That's another horrible thing we have in our society. And I actually got off all social media for a while because the comparison syndrome. A good friend of mine calls Facebook fake book, because everyone's there smiling. Oh, here's my happy Monday. Yes, I'm feeling great. Meanwhile, they tell their partner, man, I'm so sick. And to everyone out there, we have to put our shiny face. And so we get this comparison syndrome, or like, oh, well, everybody else
seems the opposite of that, where they're just,
you're right. Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And because those are all society. I mean, we're not even aware until you start to become aware, and then you can't not see it. Right.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
They don't know. We don't know. We're doing all this, and we're in that, and they're on the rabbit wheel, right? They're the perfect mom. They got the perfect house. They've got the kids are doing the dit. And I unfortunately never ever could fit in that box. I'm building a new thing. It's round in a circle. but you know what I experienced? Just had a multiple pile up of incredible traumas, all kind of right on top of each other, and you know what? That whole, when you go down and it's like you have a thought, right? And then you have that thought again. And then as soon as you feel like you're having that thought again, boy, oh boy, you're going to be going down if you don't just go, okay, just check in, because that's taking that whole, they explained it to me where I understood it the best, was that the brain, those thoughts that we're listening to thinking that they're right, well, they're not right. And whose values and beliefs and whatever, are those mine? Are they even what I believe in? I've been doing the work without the psychedelics for a few years, and holy cow, we have to go in and clean that stuff out, because it's ruining our lives, and it's giving us more of the same and more of the same and more of the same. And it gets like right now with where we're at, and the energies are so fast, and you think it's just you, right? That you got this and that. No, everybody's got a pile up going on, and it's, unless you've had it like yourself. And, I know how and where to go and get some tools to help myself. Right. But yeah, I'd go down sometimes for 5 months in the beginning. Right. And I'd come back up going, wow, like you just go unconscious with these negative, and they're not even true. They're judgments on, like you were saying, the comparison and the, having somebody look down at you because you're not fitting, what you used to fit, or whatever it is, right? And then because somebody's, got that, then all of a sudden you're thinking, well, geez, am I not, and then it's just, and it's a society thing. Yeah. And then the victim thing kicks in. We don't even know that we're giving our power away by saying, this person did it to me, because they did. And do you not see that, right? But here's the thing, if we keep doing that, you're in the energy field, right? I landed in that energy field again. So, it's mine. I can only, that's the only way I can fix it. But that is so difficult to do. Yeah. So you're telling me that these people are having this, what is probably a natural measure? They're doing the mushrooms, or they're doing LSD, or both?
It varies, but I'd say probably the most common one is psilocybin, the magic mushrooms. But amazingly, in terms of research, we're seeing great results with MDMA, which is a synthetic. So there are some people in the psychedelic field. There's it's so funny. There's this great wide debate within the field of plant medicines versus the actual plants, psilocybin, ayahuasca, ibogaine, versus the synthetic, the LSD, which is based on a natural compound, but still it's a compound, and then MDMA. But MDMA, MAPS, which is the leading nonprofit doing work in this field, is done amazing research with MDMA. In fact, they are probably the leading group that's going to help get MDMA approved in the USA by the FDA for therapeutic use, because they've seen just tremendous results through this healing through the psychedelics.
Okay, so somebody who's never had a background or known anybody who's had these mushroom trips or LSD trips in their lifetime, they're just it's not in their environment. How do you explain to them what a psychedelic trip is? Like, what does this look like? So it takes them
good. Excellent. Great. Yeah, excellent. That's a wonderful question. All right. So first thing would be that they need to do the research. You want to. Each psychedelic has different properties in terms of effects, in terms of length. Another reason why psilocybin is probably the most popular is it's one of the shorter durations. Typically, a psilocybin journey, a full journey, is about 4 to 5 hours. Compare that to an LSD journey, which can be 12 to 14 hours, compared to an ibogaine, which could be 24 hours. So that plays a role. That's one to do the research, see which of these psychedelics makes the most sense to you for your healing. We talk about one of the most important things. I say there are 3 components to a macro, full-on journey psychedelic experience. The first one is preparation. So within preparation, there's the research. There's finding the for lack of a better word, the container that you're going to use, whether it's you're going to be in your house and you're going to have a guide come over to your house, or whether you're going to go to a retreat center, or whether you're going to use, another great option for people is there are still lots of scientific studies going on all across the world. And if you're close to one of those, you can join a psychedelic study where you're going to have all the safest protocols going on. So that's really almost the ideal setting. But within preparation, we talk about knowledge of research, finding the location, getting access to the medication, which is probably the toughest part right now, unless you're in certain places like Vancouver or even other parts of Canada, or in certain states in the U.S. or in certain countries outside the U.S. By the way, if people want to combine travel with healing, there's a website called retreat.guru that lists retreat centers all across the world that do different psychedelic treatments, healing ceremonies and such.
Awesome. Thanks for that.
Yeah. So the key is preparation. You want to have a safe location. We talk about what we call harm reduction. So you want to know the medicine is pure. You want to have an expert guide or facilitator with you. And you want to be in a space where you are comfortable. People have recreationally done these things on hikes or in concerts, and we say no. You want to, if you're intentionally doing this, you want to be in a safe spot. So you'll see people in their bedrooms or their living room, with a blanket. You have your water, you have everything right there with you. And so and then you want to set an intention for the psychedelic experience. And the intention just says, this is what I want to happen. I want to clear my trauma, or one of the common ones people use is show me what I need to see. Because a lot of times we don't know the trauma, especially childhood trauma. We push that so deeply down and we think, oh yeah, I'm cured of that. It's like, oh, no, no, no. And so the intention, it doesn't mean you're going to get that intention in the psychedelic experience, but it's just a way, again, of focusing your efforts to healing. And then so that's the preparation is that first component. The second component, one more thing. In that preparation, I would also add, start building your community. Because one of the things we've discovered is after you have a psychedelic experience, you often want to tell the world, like, oh my God, this is the most amazing thing ever. But the problem is most people around you are going to look at you like, okay. Or the pin will drop and you're like, and the saddest story in my book is the story of this gentleman, Charles, who did a psychedelic journey with a bunch of friends who were doing heroin and coke and all that. And in his journey, the psychedelic, and he was doing heroin and coke and all that too. He was all self-medicating, but he happened upon the psychedelics and he took them. And in the journey, the psychedelic medicine told him, you don't need the alcohol, the heroin, the coke. You have the tools within you to heal yourself. And he came out of that journey. He's like, guys, we don't need this. And he looked around the room and they were all passed out deep in their heroin journey. And he became more isolated, more alone. And he went deeper into the drugs and the alcohol because he had no one to talk to about it. So you need to find community before you even do your first psychedelic experience, because some friends and family will support you, but you'll find that many are still in that same just say no misconception that psychedelics are, the wrong path to take. And so there are psychedelic societies all across the world. That's a great way to do it. There are also online communities. Empathic.health is a great one. They're a emerging nonprofit that is just a sharing community. You can go there and talk about your experiences with others, or just listen to others share their experiences so you can learn more. So, but in that preparation, get community, because you're going to want that support afterwards. Or, and again, if you have a therapist, that'll be part of your support mechanism as well.
No, I think that what you're saying is huge. I mean, people would not know to do that, I don't think. Right.
Yeah.
And so, I think that's really, really super important. And especially right now, I know for myself, super isolated from what my life has always been, and, I think maybe part of that is a little bit of choice, having to just clear and clean out the traumas, right? Because you need to find, you need that space to go within, don't you? Like community and someone to talk to. I think that that whole piece was missing for me for a lot of my life. And I think that I just believed that other people understood when I was talking about energy but, I now understand why people are like,
Well,
because they don't know.
Yeah, you don't know. And, even now when I hear people talk about energy and I'm even amazed by the healing from Reiki, which is just all energy flow. But, and I know this is going to sound a little woo-woo or whatever, but, I can say that after, during an ayahuasca journey, I was in this room and the whole room was electrified. I mean, all you could see was the energy moving in the room. And it was the craziest. If I didn't know that beforehand, I might have been a little freaked out. Like, what the heck is this? But so, I mean, I literally saw that energy flow that we don't normally see in our regular consciousness.
Yeah.
So,
They say that we're going to start seeing more, like the veil's lifting.
Yes.
And have you had any experience personally with that happening? Because I think it's the people that have kind of are doing this work that are starting to see some big shifts of just movement of the lifting and being more aware and awake.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And I think you have what we call more deja vu or more quote unquote matrix moments where we see things more, because we're more aware, we're more, I don't want to say more alive because that sounds silly, but more just aware of and in our head more than sort of letting us be on autopilot. And I think that's the big difference too. When we're traumatized or trauma filled in whatever capacity that is, we tend to run on autopilot because that's a safe way to run. It's a safe thing to do this thing, do that thing. So, okay, I know if I, drink and pass out, I'll be okay in the morning and blah, blah, blah. But when we heal, it's like, well, we don't need to be on autopilot anymore. We want to experience something new and different every day. We want to see life. We want to have these moments of gratitude. Before I healed, I didn't have moments of mindfulness or gratitude. I mean, maybe occasionally, a prayer or something like that. But, now, I work from home, so every hour, it's not a regimented thing, but roughly every hour I get up and I look around, I just stare outside. And I see a bird or the wind or the trees, and I just have this moment of just gratitude and appreciation. And again, late in life, but I'm still extremely grateful for it.
Well, and I think you have to make it a practice like that. So good for you, because it's not something that we know. It's not a natural thing for us to. And gratitude is the highest vibration you can. That's where the good stuff is. So if we could somehow get ourselves there, or get some kind of pattern that we're following to get ourselves there, because it's not what we know. It's
Anyway. Let me just finish. So let's go back to our psychedelic thing. So we finished that one. We did all the preparation. The other thing you might do in preparation, if you don't have a therapist and you don't want to necessarily do a retreat center, you can hire a psychedelic coach, and they can be found online. There are many. A lot of them are in places where it's legal, where psychedelics are legal, but a coach who's just giving you advice can be from anywhere. So there are also there are a couple websites that list facilitators, and unfortunately I don't have any at the top of my head, so I might send you an email or something you can post on the show notes or something. But that's another option. If you just typed in psychedelic coach in your location, I'm almost guaranteed you will probably come up with someone. The issue there, of course, is vetting that person, making sure you have a connection with them. But so there again, research. What's their background? There are more and more universities and institutes that are training psychedelic coaches now, because we are moving on this wave of legality. So look into that, look into how much experience they have in coaching people, and make sure they have experience in whatever medicine that you're trying to do. Again, psilocybin is probably the one almost every coach or facilitator has trained in, because it's the most common. So that's preparation. Then the actual experience is, we call that the journey. Each journey is different, but one of the reasons why I included the stories in the book was one of the things I saw and that I wanted to know when I was first getting to psychedelics is, yes, the stories of the cool geometric patterns and, the poster on the wall talking to me. Okay, that's all interesting stuff, but that's not the healing part. That's just the side effect of psychedelics. I wanted to know the details, and so that's what I was getting all my storytellers to say. So, I want to know, okay, if I take a large dose of psilocybin, what's going to happen? Well, I know within about 30 minutes, it's going to start taking effect. I'm going to get clammy hands. I'm going to start losing control of my temperature. That's why I have a blanket nearby, because I'm going to have temperature issues. Some people get a little heaviness in their chest. And so, again, if you're aware of these things, doing your research, then when you have that experience in the journey, you're not scared. You're like, oh, okay, this is part of the process. I also get just with psilocybin, and I don't know why, but I get this crazy tinnitus that happens in one journey, it happened the whole journey. And I'm like, okay, I'm never doing psilocybin again. And then I realized I needed to surrender to that. I was fighting it rather than saying, oh, I'm hearing this horrible buzzing in my ear, and let's just jump into it. I mean, let's make the volume louder. And then all of a sudden it went away. It's like, and so that's the other thing with psychedelics, that's maybe the hardest thing for people, is the surrender factor. The ego, as you talked about, the ego is so strong, and it's going to fight the psychedelic unless you, again, so one of the things we talk about too is, as you're going into the medicine, just keep saying, I surrender, surrender. And it's not surrender in a weakness mode, it's a surrender in a strength mode. You're saying, I'm giving the medicine the power to show me what I need to see. And so I'm surrendering to the medicine to show me what I need to heal. But we fight it because you are losing control. And the higher the ego, sometimes it's the higher the intellect, I think, the harder it is to surrender, which is why some people take very large doses. We call those heroic doses. And those are the ones that will strip away that ego, no matter how hard you try to fight it. In terms of things to learn from in the negative, in the propaganda, there's a thing called bad trips. And so that's the other thing. Oh, beware of the bad trip. And first of all, we trying to recoin that as challenging trip, because a bad trip is, typically we have quote unquote bad trips or challenging trips when we're not prepared. So a negative experience typically is when we're not prepared, and we have a whatever we want to call it, a freak out moment where we're like, oh no, I can't do this, and that just makes our then we get more fearful, and that just makes it sort of a dark experience. Again, that's why why it's so important to have someone there, that if you're having this kind of moment where, oh my God, I can't take this, the guide can be there to help you surrender, to help you move on to that next phase. And so I think that's important. But I think that fear of the bad trip is something just get over that. If you have that notion, it's just from the propaganda. Your brain's not going to fry. You're not going to have, your DNA is not going to be altered. I'm trying to think of some of the other lies. You're not going to have children with birth defects. And unless you have schizophrenic tendencies, that's the only medical condition that we say with most psychedelics. If you have that, there is a chance you could have a psychotic break and not come back. But for everybody else, everybody comes back from that journey. So even if it's a challenging one, you will come back. And but again, if you have a coach there, that'll help you guide through that process. So the journey is the actual experience. most psychedelic journeys, you'll have different waves. So you'll have periods where you are at this deepest level where, that's where you have the healing experiences. And then there typically is a break where you come down a little bit, which is good because, at least for me, psilocybin is a diuretic. So I usually need to go to the bathroom at some point. And then amazingly, you get back down to your cozy spot, and then the medicine picks up again, and you go on another wave of the psychedelic. And then there's the coming down period, which again varies by psychedelic. With psilocybin, maybe typically about 45 minutes to an hour, you come down from that. And then and then there's a period of just, we typically say with psychedelics, take at least that next day off, if not a couple of days if you can, just to let your brain kind of recover. And one of the stories in my book, we tell people, when you're on this journey, don't, turn off your phone, turn off all distractions. But in this one story, in the book, the guy was telling me, oh yeah, I had to text my mom and tell her I was so sorry because he had that in his journey. I'm like, and I just kind of like, oh, don't do that. But it turned out fine. His mom was very supportive. But so yeah, you want to, and typically after a psychedelic journey, you do want to shout from the rooftops, but it's, we're talking, no, just keep it inside you and let that healing experience really grow within you. That's the journey. And then the third phase of the psychedelic experience is what we call integration. And in my mind, integration is a lifetime. It's so funny when you first start talking psychedelics, they say, oh yeah, you should be integrating for at least a couple of weeks or a month or several months. But as I look at it and hear all these stories, really, you're integrating the journey, but you're really integrating all this healing for the rest of your life. Because typically after psychedelics or with psychedelics, like I said, you're going to maybe start practicing gratitude or mindfulness, or maybe you'll start doing yoga or meditation. And so within those modalities, you might get, and most likely will get, further healing. And so you want to keep integrating. And the three ways that I think are the best ways to integrate are one, through journaling, keeping track of your thoughts, emotions, interactions, and you can journal in whatever way, again, I wouldn't do this because I think I don't want to have my phone with me, but I had one person who actually was journaling through voice to text on her phone during a psychedelic experience. So yeah, whether it's a paper journal, a computer journal, a phone journal, iPad, whatever, that's a great way. Some people do other creative things, like they paint to express their healing, or they sculpt, or they do dance. So that's one way. So some creative outlet. To me, journaling is the best way. Second way is through community, talking to people that have had similar experiences, and that's where, again, community is so important. And then the third way is integrating using a coach or a therapist to help push you further along that journey, that healing journey.
That's great information. Thank you for going through all that, because I think that doing those things, I mean, you're in the right place to set yourself up for a good experience. I've heard that people say the excuse me, the bad trips and the this and that, right? Do you think that has something to do with the mindset or the fear of that person before going in? Yeah.
Yes. In fact, a great tool, another great holistic tool, is tapping. And so what some people do, and before psychedelic, as they're getting into their journey, they just tap like their heart chakra, or, and just say, I'm okay. One person actually in the book actually started having a panic attack after she took the psychedelic medicine, because all of a sudden she's like, why did I do that? And so she just tapped, and it calmed her, got her out of that panic attack mode. And then the psychedelic kicked in, and that was the end of that. So yeah, I think the more preparation you have, the less likely that challenging or quote unquote bad experience, because if you go in with fear, or that's why again we talk about psychedelics calling you. So if you're chasing it and you're like, oh, I need to do it this weekend, you might have a bad experience because you are pushing it, you're rushing it. And if you're as you said, if you're nervous about it or have anxiety from the lies about it, or there is some fear of this. I mean, it is if when you do a psychedelic experience, you do lose control. So if you have that strong need for control, there will be some turbulence in the experience. But again, whether if you're by yourself tapping, there's a great nonprofit called the Fireside Project, which is a psychedelic hotline. So if you are doing it alone, which you shouldn't be, but if you are and you have a moment of crisis, you can call this hotline. There'll be they're peer support, so there'll be a peer on the other end, and they have veterans, they have people in the BIPOC community. So you'll find someone that you can hopefully resonate with, and they'll just help talk you down, because that's all this is. But again, that's why it is, the more preparation you do, and the more safety measures, but in a sense, safety measures for yourself. So either a guide there, or at least have this hotline on speed dial, something like that. Or even a sober partner. If you just had a trusted friend, at least that's someone there to kind of watch over you, is a good thing.
Yeah, sounds like it. Well, that's really awesome. I was watching on Gaia when I was getting all this education on the psychedelics, and they have on the mushrooms and the cannabis, and there was some information on there that I thought was incredible. Like you probably don't know all this, but that the mushrooms are the communication of the whole forest.
Oh yeah.
Right, like
the mycelium,
very important. It's like how the whole, like wow, right? So just that little note alone is really powerful, right?
Yeah.
And what were they talking about? The cannabis, that it's like it has like flavonoids in it, right? Like and so we're thinking about the blueberries and the raspberries. Well, this has that, but they're even more potent, apparently, and they're called something a little bit different than flavonoids.
Yes.
I was really blown away by that kind of information, because we don't have that information. We're just been told, you need to go shame yourself. Think if you're even talking in that space.
Yeah.
And really, what a shame for how incredible, like you're talking war veterans coming home, there's so many suicides, and there's so many, people that are struggling.
Yeah.
And here we have something that's natural. And thank goodness there's people like you that are willing to stand up and to speak the truth about it, because a lot of people can't. They just aren't. They just care too much about what everybody else is thinking, and that keeps us stuck, and it keeps us unhealthy and in a in the hamster wheel. We have to step out of what our old fears are, or whatever. Like I love this information. I love that you came and talked to us about this today. And I'm gonna get your book for sure. Is it on Amazon?
Yes, it's on Amazon.
Okay.
And Barnes and Noble. Not that so it should be online almost anywhere where books are sold. Let me just add quickly, because I thought you made a great comment. So in the back of the book, I have a list of documentaries, also other online communities and psychedelic resources. But I would recommend Fantastic Fungi, one of the greatest documentaries. It's not about, they talk a little bit about psychedelics, but it's just about the beauty of mushrooms, which are, as you said, maybe the most amazing organism we have, because they are the communication mode and the healing mode, as you said, under all our land. I mean, under the forest, and the downsides of development that we're seeing is, as they develop, they destroy that network. It has to be rebuilt over decades. So fantastic fungi would be a great one. How to Change Your Mind, the Michael Pollan book, is a series on Netflix. Great learning tool if you're just trying to figure out, how do these psychedelics work. Again, he uses some stories and documentaries, which I think are fantastic ways of educating yourself.
Yeah. Wow. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you for all of this. And I look forward to meeting up with you again and kind of continuing this conversation, because I think we're just kind of in the beginning of what is going to be our new health care. And literally a year ago, 2 years ago, they're penny stocks still, right? And they're saying, I don't know, it's exciting, right? Because if it's something that's that natural, that is that impactful, and now we're finally being able to talk about it. And it's
because one more thing, I know we're running out of time, but one more thing just to mention, because you said that, with psychedelics, there are no side effects. They may be some temporary side effects while you're in the journey of, the clamminess that I talked about, the temperature stuff, but there's no permanent side effects. If you look at almost any prescription medicine, there's this litany of side effects. So again, as you said, these are natural healing supplements, herbs, medicines, whatever we want to call them, with almost no side effects. Why wouldn't we want to use these for healing?
Why wouldn't we? That's one of my favorite sayings right now. Why wouldn't we? Okay, well, great chatting with you. And catch up with me if you have something else that comes up that you feel is important to share. And if not, I'll come track you down in a little bit.
Yay.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Jackie. Really appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye now.